This is a little impromptu in 1 minute, if we can get it going. Short Game Wizard James Sieckmann has just got back to me. He is available now, so hopefully in a minute we can touch base with him. Wow, loads of people. Then later on we have the Gucci man that is George Gankas. So hopefully Hey Scott, I've got James Sieckmann at the minute, just impromptu. He's basically just come back to me. I didn't think he was going to be available, but he's come back to me and said, I'm free now. So I thought, do you know what? Let's go for it. Okay, so just got to find James. Once I find him, then we'll be good to go. Okay, so I sent him an invite. Hopefully he will be here in a minute. Here's James. See if we can Hey James, I've sent you an invite. If you press one of the buttons at the bottom, you can basically send an invite to me, or I have sent you an invite directly. So if you wanna come on, that'd be great. Okay, if James at the bottom of the screen, there should be a couple of icons. One of the icons will basically be to invite it or invite you to join. You might need to follow me if you can't see it, and then come back when no big rush. Yeah, he will be coming on in a minute with just a couple of technical errors, a couple of issues. Once we get past this, we should be all go. James, if you, at the bottom of the screen, see if I, oh, there you go. Perfect. Few technical issues. Oh, perfect. Look, I didn't actually know whether you were going to be available or not. Obviously, time frames and things, you're about 8 hours behind us. So I thought, do you know what? If it happens, it happens. Anybody who's here gets the delight of listening. If not, we'll do it anyway. Even if just the two of us, you can learn so much.
There you go.
So I thought you'd be a great person to talk to about short game and how short game's changing has changed over the last few years, and your thoughts on it in this time when actually we're all over here. Certainly, we're all locked up and doing very little.
So let me have it. I'll answer it.
Well. Can you just give me a little bit of background to James Sieckmann? Have you always done short game, or were you full swing before? Or
I played in college, and how's it sound? I just want to turn it down. I played in college, and then I played the Asian tour, South American tour for 4 or 5 years, and then I started the golf academy, and I had no intention in specializing in short game. It was just a passion, because one of the things I felt like I didn't understand, I felt like I understood the golf swing to some extent, understood, course management and development and things like that, but I didn't really understand what I felt like functional technique was, and why some techniques work and others didn't, whether it's bunker play or wedges around the green or whatnot. And so I just fell into a lot of self-study because I was curious and I didn't feel like I could be a great coach if I didn't really know. And then the more I discovered, the more passionate I became, which just led to more study.
So who was the inspiration behind, your short game and, the ideas and concepts that you looked at and studied?
Well, yeah, so when I started in the academy, I had a huge advantage over most teachers. My brother, Tom, was 10 years older, played the European Tour for 7 years, played Asia, played PGA Tour for 11 years, and one of his mates was studied all those tours. And so as a young man, 18-year-old, I went out while they practiced. I had dinner. I caddied for my brother when he played. I just was introduced to what amazing short game looked like. And I took my video camera 1 year at the Players Championship when I was caddying, and my brother Tom and Seth played 2 practice rounds together. And I took video of Seve, hit pretty much every shot for 2 days. And then I did the same with Raymond Floyd and Corey Pavin and some others who had the reputation for being amazing short game players. And for about 4 months, I did nothing but just kind of study those videos. I wiped the slate clean, and I came up with my own concept. So there's basically this. It's like, since I don't know what is correct, because there's all these opinions out there, and I'm just going to I'm just going to teach what the best players do, as opposed to listen to conventional wisdom and make up my own mind. And so that led to about almost 30 years ago now, 25 years ago, some really radical opinions and concepts of bunker play and pitching and chipping around the greens, kind of bucked conventional wisdom. But since I had the video proof and saw it firsthand, I was determined that I was not going to let conventional wisdom sway my opinions. And so I just started teaching what I saw.
And I mean, you know, I mean, they are great models as well, aren't they? I mean, Ballesteros is probably, you know, renowned as the best short game of all time. You know, and some of the others, Floyd and things. I mean, I always think you can never underestimate the skill level until you've stood over them and watched them. You know, I worked with Brett Rumford 12 months ago on the European tour, and it was as much of a learning for me as it was for him, based off the fact that, you know, I got the opportunity to be close enough to see what he did and talk to him about what he did. And sometimes the sound of the shots and the way they come off the face is just, you know, you can almost learn so much just watching and listening than anything else. And I think that, you know, why would we not teach what, let's say, great players have proved is they can work with if the player can do it?
Right. Well, there's physics. There's, you know, how the club interacts with the turf and the ball to create light and spin. Then there is skill, like you said. There's both the physical skill of being able to just put the club on the ball and mental skills of confidence and focus and judgment for different lies and whatnot. And I feel like obviously you need both to be great, right?
Yeah.
So there's some people that will never be as skilled as Brett Rumford, right? Because his confidence and his intuitive sense of just how to read a line and create a flight is developed over years and years of being an elite wedge player and developing that. But I sure like to try. I'd like to try to help those people develop both the functional physics and also the mental and
how
judgment skills required.
How different do you feel those techniques were that you saw from what was being done at the time? Why were they so different?
Oh my God, they're amazingly different. You know, I was taught to keep my head still, to lean on my left leg, to keep my hands ahead, to, you know, if you're hitting behind the ball, you should move the ball further back in your stance. You know, everything that I basically learned to do wrong was being taught. That's not what Seven did. It's not what Raymond Floyd did. And
do you think they were similar in a way? Do you think these great players were similar in a way between them?
Yes. So when I broke down, let's say, finesse swings around the green, I found 5 commonalities between Corey Pavin, Raymond Floyd, Seve Ballesteros, some of the other greats. There's plenty of room for style. Raymond Floyd doesn't look like Seve Ballesteros. But if you're just studying club and body movement, I think, yeah, there's some real similarities there. And that foundation, that kind of allowed the foundation for what I believe and teach. And if you look at some of the great players I've taught, you look at Tom Pernice, who I would put in Brett Rumford's category, and Charlie Lee, they look nothing alike. You could look at Steve Stricker and Lee Jansen or Corey Pavin, and they look nothing alike. But I think the foundational pieces underneath that are all similar.
So what do you see those being? What would you say the foundational pieces for creating that sort of technique are?
Right. So we can't. So if you're looking from a kind of a teacher's standpoint, it would be kind of an open stance, both with the feet in your chest, and on-plane delivery with the face or toe typically up in the backswing so that the base is open to the swing direction.
Yeah.
That the angles are coming out of the wrists, so that there's maybe the shaft is only 5 degrees de-lofted at impact as opposed to 15.
Yeah.
Angle of attack maybe 6 degrees or so. And that the energy always flows the direction of the target. A lot of people, they might back up or they move off the ball. And then in addition to that, I found that among the elite, the Steve Strickers and the Stefan Ballesteros of the world, that there was a unique sequence around the green that was nowhere near what it was in other types of shots.
And do you think that's why some of those great players struggled with different areas of the game?
100%. What makes you good from 200 yards is going to make you bad from 10. So you look at Corey Pavin, for example, who, if you look at most players, he was short and crooked. Most elite players. Obviously, amazing player, a Ryder Cup player, an Open champion, yes, Open champion. But he had a very weak grip. The face was really open in the backswing for both around the greens and his full swing. And he had a really undynamic start to his swing. Not very explosive. So that would lend itself to be great from 10 yards, 20 yards, 30 yards. And it would be very tough to be elite from 250 yards or 280 yards with those club alignments. And
I suppose, there is always that balance in a player that, they can excel at one area and not excel at the other, purely because the way that, I don't know whether it, their physiology or their natural motion or natural patterns actually allow them to produce a more almost control than dynamic distance. Because one of the conversations I've had with people almost this week, where they've been telling me about hitting it 300 yards and strong grips and, big moves to create mass clubhead speed. How do these players do around the green then?
I think you're exactly right. You have motor patterns that is established that it's human nature to try to want to use those for every motion. But I feel like a 10-yard shot is as close to a full swing as a putt or a bunker shot would be. I just feel like it's dramatically different. And so one of the tricks I try and get my players to do is, let's say if you're going to use a different sequence where the angles start to come out and you wait on your pivot.
When you say different sequence, when you say different sequence, James, what would the sequence be?
All right, so this is a really complex conversation, and if we want to talk like the biomechanics, it's going to be more confusing. So we're going to talk like golf coaches.
Yeah.
Biomechanics people talk about transition sequence, and it's all listed in deceleration order. So let's talk about like golfers, which like what can we see in the downswing, and that would be the downswing firing sequence.
Yeah.
On a 10-yard shot, the elite players, in my opinion, if you look at the club and the lead arm, they would start at the same time. The hips would not start. They wait. Once the club and lead arm start, the club's actually moving faster than any other thing. It's moving faster than the arm, it's moving faster than the hips, it's faster than the chest. So those angles start to come out a little bit. The wrist angles.
Yeah.
They're not held on. Then the lead arm and the chest turn or rotate at the same speed through the ball.
Okay.
Now, if you compare that to what you do from 70 yards, if you're hitting a flighted wedge or from 280 yards, you would start more from the ground up.
Yeah.
First thing that fire would be your hips. Then your arms would fire faster than the club, so there'd be a little bit of a down cock or extra leg. I mean, it's just completely different. And I always tell people, as the goals of the golf ball change, I want height, I want spin, I want soft touch. The movement and the way you have to use the clubs has to change. There's no way you can hit a flighted 70-yard shot the same as this little soft 10-yard shot. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I get. And how, if you looked at that as a completely different sequence, how far backward do you go with that?
That's a great question.
70 yards, because there is always that point, isn't there, where you go, it's one of these shots.
Yes. So,
do you know what I mean?
There's some research done by some biomechanics people in Sweden, and they measured 70-yard shots. And from 70 yards, the tour players sequence, if you're thinking about a flighted 70-yarder, was the same as it was from 200 yards. It was maybe not quite as dynamic, but the ordering was the same.
Okay.
As I mentioned, the best of the best, in my opinion, from 10 yards, about 10% of the tour players had this. But it's the Brett Wormfords of the world. It's the who's who's. Luke Donald, Steve Stricker, Faven, Pernice.
Yeah.
They have this sequence that's a bit different. So it would be different from every player. It depends on how strong they are. It also depends on the pin position and what they want from the ball. So if I had so for example, I coached Charlie Hoffman for 8 years. If he had a front pin at 60 yards, he'd let the club and the arm start and allow those angles to fully release. The ball would pop up. Front pin, he'd hit, what I call finesse sequence. And if he had a back pin at 60 yards, he could put it back and turn and rotate his body and, lean the shaft forward at impact and flight kind of a one-hop and skipper back into a back pin from 60 yards. So you can play either shot. It's just that, what do you want from the golf ball?
Yeah. And really what you're doing is you're almost limiting the power supplies from the different components of the body.
Yes.
To the point where you're
being weak on purpose to some extent right around the green.
Yeah. And I mean, you could possibly, it sounds a bit balmy, but you could probably actually be more aggressive, but in a different part of the body. Because
yes, exactly right.
For me, let's say I'm moving my body through hitting a shot, I've probably got the whole mass of the muscles in my upper body on the ball to produce power. If I'm using let's say, feeling like I'm using more my arms and letting the club go, that's a completely different firing pattern through my muscles. So if I'm only using my hands and my club, I could probably feel like I'm being more aggressive with the club head than I would ever be able to be if I was using my body, because the speed that the ball would come off at would probably be very, very different in the two.
Completely different. You're exactly right. And just because I'm saying finesse sequence, I'm not saying you don't use your body. You can. I mean, you look at Jason Day, who I think is amazing right around the greens. But he doesn't start his downswing by firing his hips and then decelerating them rapidly so he can fire his trunk. There's some stability. The trunk and the lead arm kind of go together, which is weak. If the trunk fired and decelerated so the arms could then fire and accelerate, then that would be different. So I think if you, as a coach and as a player, as you start looking at that, I think it's very easy to see how you can swing with some speed and that the ball will go not very far. And I would use Jason Day as an example again. He can absolutely hit high with spin. Now I call it bottom speed. I feel like if the speed is there instead of like in the start of the downswing. Yeah. Right. So it's much later in the swing.
I remember Brett hitting some shots around the green at the Dunhill Links a couple of years ago, and if you actually looked at what he was doing, just as a visual, he probably hit 10 shots that were completely different, but in a way it looked the same. then when I said to him, well, what's the difference between that one and that one? Because they look the same. They almost look the same on a camera. Yeah, but he said, the order the body's working is different. That one's a little more hands coming past. That one's a little bit more body. I moved a touch on that one. But the amount that he did it was probably very small in the big picture. But the actual control of the ball was vastly different.
Yeah, I would agree, and that's the skill part. And I remember Sevy talking in a practice session about the little soft flop shot. You know, he's like 10 yards going to pop it in. He just says, you know, I'm going to feel the release just a bit more under with my right hand, and it's nothing you could ever see. But the golf ball did react completely different. And
yeah, no, go.
I was just going to say, sometimes elite players don't make great coaches. And the reason why is because they teach their fields. They say, well, I feel this, the ball does that. Well, you got to get the club in the right place so that you can do this release, you know. And so a great coach, I think, sees the bigger picture and understands the physics, not just the feels. And hopefully can put those two together and allow the individual person to find the right feel for them. And I would never hesitate to say that Sevy's field or Brett Rumford's field should apply to the very next guy. I know what the club's going to do or need to do for the ball to react a certain way. And then I can back my way into how the movement, I think, for each individual person should be. And that's the mark, I think, of a great coach.
And do you think, you know, when you look at the variety of short game shots, anything from what we're saying is almost 70 yards and inwards, that the actual concept stays the same, but the way in which we set ourselves up in order for the club to be in the right start position is almost what varies the most?
Yes, that's what I believe or teach, and I feel like it's simpler that way. I can get the ball to fly low, get it to run, I can get it to pop up and spin, and even though there might be some nuanced feel to that, essentially it's the way I set up. It's how much shaft lean, how much face there is, where's the ball, how close am I to the ball, how far away, how low are my hands, how high are my hands. As I change my setup, that'll change what happens to the ball, but I think the foundational pieces underneath stay the same. I hate when players say, oh, I'm going to hit a low shot, and they jam their hands forward, or I'm going to hit a high shot and I'm going to feel this thing at the bottom. I just don't feel that's the easiest way to play. And I don't feel the greats did it that way. Like I said, I think they create the shot trajectory, the pattern generally in their setup, and then they have this ability to swing the club, use it, in my mind, properly to get the consistent contact to control the repeatability.
I mean, you know, when you've looked at this from a science perspective, has that reinforced what you've been saying to him anyway?
Yeah, it really did. I mean, when I've been teaching this concept, like I said, from the beginning, just from watching Sevy Ballesteros and studying the videos that I shot of him, and then without proof, really, just in opinions, you know, I've taught this and was having good success probably for 15 years. And then finally, when I became a board member at the Titleist Performance Institute in 2010, Dr. Rose showed me 3D data of, they had 110 different tour players hitting both 200-yard shots and 10-yard shots, and showed me that what I was teaching matched the data they had. And so it hasn't changed what I teach. It's just simply made me more confident that what I'm doing is going to work for the majority of the players. And
I've always thought that, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, is that as players climb the tree in golf, their short games have to get better and better, because the area surrounding the greens and the greens just become more and more difficult to control the ball around. So
yeah, no, that's exactly true. I get probably 10 players a year that come to my academy and say, well, I thought I was good around the greens, but I got in a tour event and I realized I can't chip, so it's, I would call it mini tour player lies, that they're overseeded, the grass is this high, but a lot of times like at Augusta, they'll mow the ryegrass towards the tee box away from the greens. So every lie is a bit into the grain. It's tight, it's sticky. And if you don't know how quite to deliver the club into the ball so that you're using a little bit of the bottom of the club, you can look silly in a hurry. And you're right, the greens get firmer, the pins get closer to the edge. And so, if you think you're tidy around the greens and you go play Oakmont or in the United States or someplace like that, you can get exposed really quickly. And so you're right, the higher up you go, the more important your short game becomes, I think, or easier it is to get exposed for not having a good short game anyway.
And when you look at different lies, like this real thick grass around the edge of the green, do you think that actually changes the sequence at all? Do you have to use a little more body?
No, it doesn't.
Or not?
It changes the physics a little bit in that if you got to read your lie. So if the ball's sitting down, you need to steepen the delivery. So on a fairway lie, 10-yard shot, which is how I always do my testing, the delivery for the players I coach is typically about 6 degrees down, the down angle. Like I said, with the face open to the path and the low point in front. If you had a ball sitting down in thick grass, not only do you need more speed, but you need a little steeper delivery. So whether you feel that with a little extra wrist hinge or whether you put the ball back in your stance if you're going to run it, or whether you keep it forward and widen out your stance and lean a little bit. And you might only lean not only into your left side, but you might lean the handle a little bit forward so the club works a little more up and down. But I feel like you always release it. You always have the energy flowing to the target. You always have the right sequence. There's rhythm. There's some foundational things that don't change, in my opinion, regardless of the lie. Now, if the ball's sitting up in the air and a lot of air underneath it, you might take less loft and you might shallow the delivery. And you can do that in a number of ways too. You can put the ball forward. You can play a little bit of a draw type hand path motion to shallow the delivery. And, I have great video of Seve Ballesteros doing that on an upslope where he had a severe uphill lie and he set up a bit more open than normal, took it a bit more inside and shallowed the delivery that way. So he just didn't throw the club into the hill.
So if we were looking at a player's ability to hit shots, the first thing that they would have to do is to be able to assess the lie and decide on how the club needs to be delivered to create the appropriate result.
Right. So let's just say you get a student hitting fairway lies, 10-yard shots, flat, very simple, and they have good control and repeatability and all the balls around the hole. Well, that doesn't mean he's an elite player, because being an elite player is going from different types of grass, firmness and softness, uphill, downhill, all the funky lies that you can get, and having this intuitive sense of how to deliver the club and match the speed with the loft that you've created. Like someone like Brett Rumford has this amazing sense, right? Well, you're going to get that sense, and that's called intrinsic knowledge. 95% of what you know in life is things you know, and you don't know how you know them. You just do. Are you going to develop that intuitive sense by putting 50 balls in a pile and hitting the same shot over and over again? No, you need a wide breadth of experiences. So guys like Ricky Fowler or the elite around the green, a lot of times you say, hey, how'd you learn all this stuff? He says, well, I just threw balls all over and I played games and I, never repeated a shot. And it's a sheer volume of experiences, both with good outcomes and bad outcomes, because the bad outcome can point you in the right direction, that allow them to develop this ability. So I'm a big fan of training, competing, random, having competitions with your mates, closest to, you pick, I'll pick, instead of like sit in a pile and work on your motion. That only should happen the first lesson if you're struggling with the technique. But once you get reasonable foundational technique, you really need to develop your shot making.
And how do you mentioned there that you know playing games between you and somebody else, or just throwing balls around in a random way. Do you actually do it? Do you set them certain tasks to do where they can measure it, or because I spoke to Dave Alred earlier in the week, who's obviously the performance guy with Francesco Molinari, and he talked a lot about the player being able to measure themselves against themselves and be able to see that they're getting better.
Absolutely. No, I do a bit of both. So you can develop one game where let's say you determine that they're a little deficient in a certain skill. So I'll give you an example of that, and then we'll talk about the other that Dave was talking about. So let's say you have a player that hits good shots but picks the wrong landing spot. Can't quite match the landing spot with the situation. So if you said, okay, there's 5 holes on this practice area, green, this is what we're going to do. From right here, you're going to walk out and you're going to put a coin on the green where you're going to land it, where you intend to land it. And as soon as you land a ball within 1 foot, well, I don't know what the meters would be, a half a meter, let's say, or a third of a meter of the coin, and that ball ends up within a meter of the hole, that hole's completed. Now, if you miss the coin or you hit the coin and it goes too far, let's say I hit my spot, but it goes 9 feet past the hole, you now go out and pick up the coin and move it to the correct place. And so it's the act of seeing what happened, forcing the student to go be introspective and move the coin to the correct place. Well, there's an experience, you learn from it, and there's an adjustment. That's how that's the learning process. So you might create games where you got to win 5 holes of this landing spot game. That's one way to get somebody to develop and train. And a second would be to say, okay, we're going to play this 5-hole up and in game, and you got to get 4 of the 5 up and in and 1 down and 3. And you're going to shoot and track your score and journal it, and you're going to stay here until you do it. And the reason why that type of practice is important is that ultimately, to be a competitive tournament player, you have to perform where it's an all or nothing type of shot under an agitated state.
Yeah.
And so often we practice, and it's I'm comfortable. There's nothing in the line. I do fine, and it just does not transferable, right? Yeah. But if they've played this game and failed it 3 times, and they've been out there for 45 minutes, and now they have this one up and in that they have to get in to win the game or start over, and they succeed, then that one reputation is really preparing them for the big moment to come.
Yeah.
And that's what you're looking for as a coach and as a student.
Yeah. And when you talk about them putting a marker down for landing spot, do you have do you as a coach have any preference on where that landing spot should be?
I don't. I don't believe that it's get on the green as quickly as possible and let it roll. I think that's BS.
Yeah.
The right shot you play is the one you see.
Yeah.
And Brett Rumford's going to walk up to the ball and he's going to see a shot. He doesn't even know why he's picking the club and why he sees that shot. That's the intuitive sense.
Yeah.
Where Steve Stricker is going to see a completely different type of shot in a different landing spot. And there's no way to say that one is right and the other is wrong. If you're playing a shot, let's say that your coach wants, but you don't see, you're going to do worse. So to me, now one mistake, if I could add into that, would be people only see, especially young kids these days, only see high shots because that's all they practice. And I don't like that. I like 8 irons. I like pitching wedges. I'm a little bit old school there. So how are you ever going to see a pitching wedge if you never rep it in practice?
Right? that's quite an interesting thing, though, because I absolutely agree with you 100%. Because when we do what is county training, which is to pull, let's say, 20, 30 players over a period of time who are classed as being the better kids within the county, and we do some short game skills tests with them, invariably they've only ever got a lob wedge out half the time. And I do wonder sometimes, that actually that idea that it's a lob wedge is purely from what they've seen on the TV.
It might be, and once again, there's two elements at play. One is nature versus nurture. So if you grew up and the wind was in Northern Ireland and the wind was blowing 40 and the green was brick hard, you wouldn't be playing lob wedge, right? It's just a rough club.
Yeah.
But in America, a lot of times you can get by with it because the grasses are soft, the greens are up, the greens are firm. But what if I had a young player, 15-year-old, and all he used was lob wedge? I would design a game for him where he had to play from a position to the same pin, 4 different clubs to that pin, and hit that club until he got one inside 4 feet. Now, what he's really forcing him to do, so his lob wedge is the one he always plays. He hits it up there. But now he's got hit sand wedge to 4 feet, pitching wedge, let's say 8 iron. He's got 8 iron out. He has no clue where to land it or how much to give it. But he's got to stay there until he gets one in 4 feet. And the score might be the number of balls it takes you to hit each club to 4 feet. So you might say it takes you 9 balls to hit all 4 clubs in there. All right. At the end of that exercise, you could say, well, what club was the easiest to use? And he might go, you know what? Pitching wedge, because it was an easy little one hop and stop into the hill, pop it up and stop by the hole, where lob wedge, I really had to spin it to get it to stop. An 8 iron, I didn't know where to land it, So at the end of that type of exercise, that the epiphany might be, oh, you know what? If I had that situation, I would probably should use pitching wedge. But once again, how are they going to develop that sense if they go practice and they only have 1 club in their hand?
Yeah.
So I make my players, I said, you can pick any club, but you have to have 4 clubs in your hand, because one of the things you're practicing is your judgment. What club to use, where to land it, how much to give it, how much break. And if you're out there with 1 club, then in certain circumstances, you're playing the wrong club. You have to play the wrong club because you only have one to choose from.
That's brilliant. And, I think that is one of them, especially for juniors, it's one of them concepts that doesn't seem to come easy, to what they see and what they do. I think that awareness of being able to understand where it would land with different clubs is brilliant. Because then obviously the next thing is, can the player then execute what they want? But at least they're able to see the variations of what the club would do.
Well, what you're really getting at is the lack of mindfulness that most people train with. And I think that's the true difference between the champions, the elite performers in any sport. And Kobe Bryant said it's not how long you can work, it's how long you can work and still be mindful while you're doing it. A lot of people that go out there, they put the earbuds in, they're just going through the motions. And to me, if you have a shot and you can be introspective, you can see the landing spot, see how it reacted out of the lie, see how it rolled, and then make the adjustment. That's where the magic happens. And there are only certain people that are willing to put that much mental energy into what's going on in their life, and those are the people that develop at the rate and become ultimately the high performers.
Because there is a huge psychological side to short game, isn't there? Because it's almost the result of the short game shot, can probably have more impact than maybe even the result of where they've driven it.
Right. Well, I would say the motion gets simpler, but the mental challenges get more difficult. when the closer you are to the hole, the more the result, the more a bad shot has potential to be mentally embarrassing, and which is just not allowable, right?
Yeah.
And so it takes a real mental strength and fortitude, I think, to be resilient. You don't look quite as silly when you hit a 5-iron offline as you do when you hit a 10-yard shot, across the green. So even though the athletic ability, I think, required to